Welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The Tuesday had started like any other Tuesday, which is to say with a quiet sort of predictability that had become the hallmark of my life since Richard passed and the kids flew the nest I was. Carol, by the way, just a woman tending her small garden of memories. Anrold's in a sleepy suburban cul-de-sac sun was doing that lovely late morning thing you know where it filters through the kitchen window, just some making little rainbows and the steam rising from my second cup of coffee. I'd been meaning to tackle the overflowing bookselville in the den, a task I'd put off for, about 6 months, and had finally steeled myself for the dusty endeavor. That's when the doorbell chimed no. I don't get many unexpected visitors, occasional deliveries sometimes. Martha from next door wanting to borrow a cube of sugar or share the latest neighborhood gossip, so a little flutter of curiosity stirred in me as I wiped my hands on my apron and headed for Theodore, peeking through the peephole. I saw a young man standing on my porch, a book tucked under his arm. It took me a memento, place him tall, lanky, with that familiar shock of sandy blonde hair that always seemed to defy a comb. It was Liam, Tom, and Sarah's boy from across the street. Goodness, he wasn't a boy anymore, was he? Must be 27, 28 by now. I hadn't seen him much since he'd gone off to college. I opened the door. A smile opening the door, already forming Liam. What a surprise come on, and he had a shy smile, the kind that crinkled the corners of his bright blue eyes. Sarah's eyes. Hi, Mrs. Henderson, hope. I'm not disturbing you, not at all, dear. I was just psyching myself up to battle a mountain of books. What brings you by? I stepped back, gesturing him into the hallway. The scent of old paper, enamel polish, my signature. Home fragrance seemed to greet him. Mom asked me to return this, he said, holding out the book. It was an old, well-loved copy of To Quill a Mockingbird one. I often went out she finished it last week, and, well, you know, Mom, she gets sidetracked. Ickled Sarah was a wonderful woman, but focus wasn't always her strong suit. Thatch does. Thank you, Liam. Would you like to come in for a moment? I just brewed a fresh pot of coffee, or maybe some icedia. It's warming about there, the words were out before I'd really thought them through, just the old habit of hospitality. He hesitated for a split second, just long enough for me to think he'd declined coffee. Sounds great coffee, actually. If it's no trouble, no trouble, all I assured him, leaving the wait of kitchen. Have a seat at the table. My kitchen is sunny. Yellow walls, a bit cluttered with canisters and recite books, the window above the sink looking out onto my bird feeder, which was currently hosting a rather boisterous blue jay. Liam sat placing the Harper Lee classic carefully on the checker bluff. He looked a little out office in my cozy, slightly old-fashioned kitchen, dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, yet there was an ease about him too. So how have you been, Liam? I asked it, pouring him a mug of coffee, the dark aroma filling the air. Last I heard you were working. Was it in the city, some kind of tech thing? He tipped the mug with a grateful nod. Yeah, software, cinnamon, and it's interesting, keeps me busy, he took a sip of coffee. This is really good coffee. Mrs. Henderson, call me Carol, please, dear. Mrs. Henderson makes me feel ancient, I said with a light laugh hand. The secret to the coffee is a cinnamon stick in the grounds. A genuine smile spread across his face, then transforming his somewhat serious expression. Carol. Okay, cinnamon. Huh. I'll have to remember that. He looked around. Kitchen, his gaze lingering on the photographs pinned to the corkboard by phone, pictures of my kids at various ages, Richard and me on a long ago beach vacation. It's nice in here. Homey smells like my grandma's house. Used to that little comment, so simple, tugged at lime something. In my chest, my own grandmother's kitchen had always been a haven of warmth and comforting smells. Think. You, Liam, that's a lovely compliment. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the only sounds the ticking off the grandfather clock in the hall and the distant hum of a lawnmower. I noticed his hands, then cradling the coffee mug. They were long-fingered, capable looking hands, not the soft hands of a boy anymore. There were faint ink stains on his right index finger like he'd been writing. So, did you enjoy that book? I asked, nodding towards To Kill a Mockingbird. It felt like a safe, neutral topic, his expression softened. I actually read parts of it when Mom was donated. It's been years. It's powerful, still holds up. You know, it really does, I Atticus agreed. Atticus Finch was always a hair of mine. Mine too. He said, his voice a little quieter. It makes you think about things. About doing the right thing, even when it's hard. He looked directly at me, his blue eyes surprisingly intense. There aren't a lot of Atticus in the world anymore. Are there? His question so direct and a little melancholic. Caught me off guard. It wasn't the sort of thing you expected from your neighbors. Son who just pop it over to return a library book. It was that kind of question that usually came after a few glasses of wine with old friends or in the quiet searching hours of the night, and that I suppose was the first little tremor, the first hint. That this wasn't going to be just a polite, superficial chat. The air in my sunny kitchen suddenly felt a little thicker charged, with an unspoken something, and what happened next found myself leaning forward, genuinely wanting to hear what he had to say next. What happened after that simple question, well, that truly did surprise me. Hadn't wait for an answer. Not really, it was more of a thought spoken aloud. Had traced the rim of his coffee mug with a fingertip. He continued, a slight furrow in his brow. Everyone's so quick to judge, so loud with their opinions, but though many are willing to actually stand for something to listen, it feels like. The world feels noisier, less art. I found myself nodding slowly. Know what you mean, Liam. The world feels noisier somehow than it used to, and not always in a good way. I thought of that constant barrage of news, the endless arguments on social media that even I, a reluctant participant, couldn't entirely escape. Exactly, he said, looking relieved that I understood. I work in tech, now, and it's all about connection, supposedly. Connecting people across the globe. But sometimes I think we've just found more ways to misunderstand each other, faster and louder than ever before. Gave a short, somewhat rueful laugh, Surrey. I didn't mean to get philosophical on you. It's just something I've been thinking about lately. No, don't apologize, I said, and I meant it. It's refreshing, actually. How often did I have conversations like this anymore, my friends? And I usually talked about our gardens, our grandchildren, the late stashes and pains, important things. Yes, life things, but not often this kind of searching. It's a valid thought and a little surprising to hear from some of your age, if you don't mind me saying. I guess I associate that kind of world weariness with us older folks. He smiled a genuine, almost boyish grin this time, maybe. I'm just an old soul. Or maybe it's the books Mom always said. I had my nose in a book from the time I could read, yours included. He added, gesturing to Theckaby of Mockingbird, this one, The Great Gatsby, Fahrenheit 451. They make y'all think they do, indeed. I murmured, my men drifting to my own dusty shelves and thuddin'. A silent testament to a lifetime of seeking understanding through stories. It's funny, you mentioned Fahrenheit 451. I was just thinking about rereading that. It feels more relevant than ever these days, doesn't it? The idea of knowledge being dangerous, of people willingly giving up the right to think for themselves. Liam's eyes lit up. It really does. The way Batty talks about we books had to be burned. It's chilling, big gaze. You can see shades of it happening, people choosing easy entertainment over anything that challenges them. He leaned forward a little the earlier. Shyness complete elegant, replaced by an animated passion. I actually tried to talk about it with some guys at work, and they just looked at me like I had two heads. They were more interested in the latest superhero movie or a viral video. I felt a pang off something akin to recognition, not because I discussed dystopian novels with my peers often, but because I knew that feeling of holding a thought or a passion that didn't quite fit with the people around you. It can be hard to find people who want to dig a little deeper, I acknowledged. Yeah, he said, then looked down at his mug, a flicker of Theaterlier reserve returning. So, thanks the conversation for letting me ramble, Liam. I said gently it wasn't rambling, it was a conversation and a very interesting one. I topped off his coffee, and then my only afternoons had shifted, now casting longer shadows across the kitchen floor. The blue jay had flown off, replaced by a pair of chattering sparrows. Tell me, what else have you been reading or thinking about? It was a simple invitation, but it felt like opening a door I hadn't realized was closed. He hesitated foreignly a moment before a small smile touched his lips. Well, since you asked the IDs, and just like that, the conversation flowed again, easier this time. We talked about books, yes, but it wasn't just about plots and characters. It was about the ideas they sparked, the way they made us feel, the questions they left us with. He spoke with an earnestness, a surprising depth of thought that I found myself drawn to. He talked about the pressures of his fast-paced job, the feeling of being a small cog in a very large machine, and his quiet desire to do something more, something that mattered. Was yet I listened, truly listened. I listened perhaps in a way I hadn't listened to Tonyon in a long time. There was no agenda, no need to offer solutions or advice. Just the simple act of hearing another person's thoughts, their quiet hopes and anxieties. And in his words, I found echoes of my own younger self, that period of searching and questioning that seems to fade with the routines and responsibilities of middle age. He has given questions too, about Richard, about my children, about what it was like growing up in a different era. He wasn't just being polite. There was a genuine curiosity in his voice, a desire to understand. I found myself sharing things I hadn't spoken of in years, memories that lay dormant, coated in the dust of everyday life. I talked about my early dreams of being a journalist, a passion set aside when motherhood called, even confessed my secret love for old black and white movies, the kind with witty dialogue and glamorous stars. Yeah, I wanted to be a journalist. He asked, his expression thoughtful. Why didn't you pause it later, after your kids were grown? The question was direct, but no tongue-in. I paused, looking out the window at the now peacefully feeding sparrow's life, I suppose, I said with a sigh. How's a way of setting you on a path, and sometimes you forget there were other trails you once wanted to explore, and then it just feels too late. I don't think it's ever too late to explore a trail. Carol, Liam said softly, his gaze steady on mine, maybe just in a different way. His words so simple, so earnest, so simple-ended with a surprising weight. It wasn't a platitude, it felt like a genuine belief he was offering me. And in that moment, looking at this young man, my neighbor's son, who I'd only ever known as a child from across the street, I felt a connection that was as unexpected as it was profound. The shock wasn't a sudden event, no crashing cymbals or dramatic revelation. It was a quieter thing, a dawning awareness. The shock was realizing how much common ground could found in the most unlikely of place with the most unlikely of people. It was surprise of being truly seen and of seeing someone else, perhaps for the first time. The afternoon was wearing on, flight outside, turning golden, and I knew this conversation was something special, something I wouldn't soon forget. Grandfather clock in the hall chimed 3, a soft sonorous sound that seemed to mark a shift in the afternoon's gentler rhythm. Liam glanced towards the sound, a flicker of awareness in his eyes, as if remembering that time outside this kitchen was still moving forward. Wow, 3 o'clock already, he said, a note of surprise in his voice. I should probably let you get back to your day. I've taken up so much of your time. Not at all, Liam, I said, and it was the truest. This has been nothing I'd said all day. This has been, well, it's been a real pleasure. I meant it. The mountain of books in the den was completely forgotten, and in its place was a feeling of lightness. Off unexpected camaraderie, he stood up, and I did too for a moment. We just stood there by the table, the remnants of our caffeine conversation hanging in the warm air between us. There was a comfortable sense, not awkward, but one that acknowledged that something meaningful had passed between us. Thank you again for the coffee, Carol, he said, his earlier shyness replaced by a warm sincerity, and for the conversation. It's not every day you get to talk about Atakis, Finch, and dystopian futures with someone who actually gets it. I smiled. Pleasure was all mine, Liam. It's good to know there are still people out there reading the good books and thinking the big thoughts. He picked up To Kill a Mockingbird from the table, holding it for a moment, he said, looking at the Big Thoughts foreign cover. I have a few books at my parents' place. Some I think you might enjoy, old sci-fi mostly, but the kind that really makes you think, like you said. Maybe I could bring them over sometime if you'd like that. Is the offer was casual. Yet it felt like more than just a polite gesture. It was an opening, a possibility of future conversations, and he found myself to my own surprise genuinely hoping he would. I'd like fate very much, Liam, I said. I'm always looking for new old books, if that makes any sense. He grinned. Makes perfect sense to me. He headed towards the hallway, and I walked with him at the front door. He paused, turning to face meth. Afternoon light from the sidelight windows illuminated his face, highlighting the earnestness in his blue eyes. Seriously, Carol, he said, his voice a little lower, more earnest. Thinks I've been feeling a bit adrift feeling. Adriftly, my job is fine, pays the bills, but to me times, I wonder what the point of it all is. Talking with you today, it helped. It made me feel a bit more grounded. His admission, so open and vulnerable, touched me deeply. Here was this young man on the cusp of his life, grappling with the same existential questions that people of all ages face, and he was sharing that with me, a woman practically a stranger to him an hour before. It was a gift, that kind of trust, Liam. I said, my voice equally soft. We all feel adrift, sometimes, no matter how old we're. The important thing is to keep seeking those moments of connection, those conversations that make us feel grounded. They're out there sometimes in the most unexpected places. A smiled, a meeting of minds, thinking of how this ordinary Tuesday had become anything, but he met my gaze, a look of profound understanding passing between us. It wasn't a romantic connection, not in any conventional sense. It was something else, something perhaps rarer and in its own way more precious. It was a meeting of minds, a recognition of shared humanity, a moment of genuine empathy that transcended age and circumstance. This was the real shock, the beautiful quiet surprise of it all. The world suddenly felt a little less noisy, a little more hopeful. I'll see you around, Carol, he said, opening the door. You too, Liam, and tell your mom. I said, hello. He nodded, gave a small wave, and closing the door, then he was gone, walking down the porch steps and across the street. I watched him. For a moment, a tall, thoughtful figure disappearing into the familiar landscape of our neighborhood, a landscape that somehow looked a little different now, imbued with a new layer of meaning. I closed the door slowly, leaning against it for a moment. The kitchen was quiet again, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of neighborhood. The scent of coffee still lingered, but now it was mingled with the fainter, more intangible aroma of shared thoughts and unexpectedship. I walked back into the kitchen, me gaze falling on the 2 empty coffee mugs still on the table, such ordinary objects, yet they felt like artifacts returning to the kitchen from a significant encounter I hadn't battled. The mountain of books in the dining hadn't done any of the chores I'd planned. Instead, I had stumbled into something far more enriching. I had connected with another human being on a level I hadn't anticipated, and it had stirred something within me, something that had been dormant for too long. It was a feeling of aliveness, of curiosity, of a renewed sense of wonder about the world and the people in it. My neighbor Sen had come by to return a book, and in doing so he had returned a piece of myself to me. I walked over to the window while both the sink looking out at my small garden. The marigolds were blazing orange in the late afternoon sun. Richard Holloway's loved marigolds, he'd said. They were like little suns, even on cloudy days. For a long time after he passed, looking at them had brought a pang of sadness, but today they just looked bright, cheerful, full of life. Liam's me old dream words about it never being too late to explore a trail, even in a different way, echoed in my mind. My old dream of being a journalist. It wasn't about bylines in a big newspaper anymore. Maybe it was about something simpler, Maybe it was about capturing stories, even small ones, maybe. It was about paying attention, truly paying attention to the world around me, to the quiet dramas and unexpected connections that unfolded every day, even in a sleepy suburban cul-de-sac. I thought about the conversation, the ease with which would move from Pulitzer to deeper reflections. There had been no pretense, no awkwardness. Just natural unfolding. It was a reminder that genuine connection doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic events. It's as simple as two people sharing a cup of coffee and a willingness to listen, truly listen. The initial shock he'd mentally noted wasn't about scandal or drama, but the profound realization. Oh, so easily we can misjudge or overlook the people around us, even those we savory. Liam wasn't just Tom and Sarah's boy anymore. He was a thoughtful, searching individual with a rich inner life, someone capable of deep conversation and surprising insights. And perhaps in his eyes, I wasn't just Merch Anderson, the quiet widow from across street. Perhaps he saw something more too that evening. Instead of turning on television out of habit, I found myself pulling out an old, empty notebook and a pen. The ink flowed surprisingly nicely. I didn't write about grand philosophies or try to solve the world's problems. I just wrote about the personal discovery after, about the sunlight in the kitchen, the smell of coffee and cinnamon, earnest look in a young man's eyes. He talked about books and dreams and the search for meaning. I described the way the conversation had meandered like a gentle stream, touching on unexpected shores. It felt good to write, to put those thoughts and feelings into words. It was like exploring one of those forgotten trails. Liam had mentioned Note a Path. Back to an old dream, perhaps Buddha. New path, one that felt uniquely my own. He realized that the personal discovery wasn't just about seeing Liam differently, it was about seeing myself. Though he wasn't quite sure what that differently to, I wasn't just a collection of past roles. Wife, mother, widow, I was still Carol, a person capable of new connections, new thoughts, new growth. The encounter had been brief, just the encounter had been brief, a couple of hours on an ordinary Tuesday, but its ripples were continuing to spread. It had nudged me out of a comfortable, perhaps too quiet routine. It had reminded me of the joy of intellectual companionship, the spark that comes from a meeting of minds, and it had done so with such mutual respect that a gentle unfolding of shared vulnerability. A few days later, I saw Sarah, Liam's mom, at the grocery store. Carol, she'd exclaimed. Liam told me had such a nice chat with you the other day. He really enjoyed your coffee and your company. He even said you talked about some of those serious books. How she beamed. It's so good to see him connecting with people. He can be a biter served, you know. I smiled. He's a wonderful young man. Sarah, you and Tom did a great job, and I meant it. He was a testament to the fact that thoughtfulness and depth weren't lost qualities. The world might be noisy, as I'd said to him, but there were still quiet places, quiet conversations, where real understanding could be found. Me. Little Kitchen had been one of them. That Tuesday afternoon, I didn't know if Liam would bring over those sci-fi books. Shed mentioned it. Didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. What mattered was the experience itself, the unexpected gift of that afternoon. It had been a reminder that life, even in its quieter chapters, could still hold surprises, still offer moments of profound connection and personal growth. It had shocked me, yes, but in the best possible way. It had woken me up a little, reminded me to keep my own doors and remained open, and for that I was incredibly grateful. The book he returned was about justice and empathy, and in a small personal way. Our conversation had been about that too, about seeing each other clearly and connecting with respect and an open heart, and that I thought was actually worth remembering.